I thought this book was the typical book about strategy that illustrates the different themes in strategy, chess strategy, divided in chapters like King in the Center or Minority Attack or something like that, right? Instead, what I found was very, very interesting. Practically, it's a collection of 90 games that are truncated at a certain point, and at that point the author asks you to choose one of different 3 or 4 different moves. Okay? Then what happens is that there is a section with all the solution. When he asks you about the 3 or 4 different moves, he asks you in this format that now I will show you. For example, here you see there is option A, B and C, no? And then you can go to see the solution and see if you actually understood what was the position and what you had to do with it. I like this type of book because it's hands-on, right? Practically you have the chance to practice immediately. It doesn't matter if you do it right or wrong, okay? But I like the idea of practicing, of seeing the things that are pragmatic. And I hope you will enjoy it too. I will start showing you game number 1 or test number 1, which is Larsen against A. Nielsen. It was played in Esbjerg 1953 and Larsen played knight f3. Now the game goes up to move 16. At move 16 it will present you option A, B and C, okay? And that you must pause the video and decide which one is right. So knight f3, knight f6, c4, c5, so we know that this is the symmetrical English. d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight c6, knight c3, d6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop d7, knight c2. This is an interesting thing, okay? In reality it's a maneuver because white wants probably to take control of d5, so it's possible that something like this will be played, okay? Or generally it's like that, it's knight e3 and then they take control of d5, so it's not going back without a reason, okay? And of course the book doesn't explain you this because it's not the goal of the book, okay? So bishop g7, b3. Here it says that castle was possible and gives a little line. Castle, bishop b2, a6, castle, and now there is a dubious move. Notice that this book was probably printed in 2008, yes, so it's possible that some of the ideas or something could have been refuted, okay? Why? Because engines are terrible, they continue to improve compared to us human, that we continue to go down the drain, and of course they also change their evaluation of the position. Now rook b8, he says it's the beginning of a dubious plan, and he says queen a5 was the better move, okay, the better plan. So let's see, after rook b8, rook c1, and now there is a big positional mistake, which is b5. It seems that this move, queen a5, was the move to play, and this game was played in 1953, but the author refers to a game in which queen a5 was played, which was played in 1994 between Nemeth and Leko. Leko, we know that is a very, very strong player, right? That game continued with knight d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes g7, knight c3. Oops, sorry, I made a mistake. Knight e3, knight takes e3, oops, king takes g7, rook c2, rook f c8, and here it says with only a very small edge for white. So that's why knight e3 was important, to avoid that white would take probably control of d5. Okay, so let's return back. Sorry if I pause the video for a second and go back. So I was returning to that position, and I noticed one thing, that black played e6, and after white plays castle, played this, and the author writes the beginning of a dubious plan. But in reality, I'm sorry, the dubious plan starts with this, because the continuation rook b8 is just played because he wants to play this, right? b5. So he's coherent in a sense about what he wants to play and why. Now, I'm not saying that the move queen a5 wasn't the right one to play. On the contrary, that's the right move. The problem is that maybe queen a5 has been found thanks to a computer, while a6, rook b8 and b5 are a real human plan. You understand what I mean, right? So that's the point. So after castle there was rook b8, he says beginning of a dubious plan, but rook c1, b5, it's clearly still connected to this. And why this is a dubious plan, you say, compared to queen a5? But the idea is that the human understood that he didn't want to leave the rook on that diagonal, and so he played that. So that's the difficult thing. How would you really find something so different? Because honestly, everybody don't want to push this without having taken away the rook from this diagonal, no? Right? So that's what it doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so the game continue with knight d5, okay, and then knight takes d5, bishop takes g7, king takes g7, c takes d5, knight e5. And here he says, even though this e5 knight is going to be a source of concern for black, knight e5 does not solve black's problem either. And here he gives a game that was played in 1960 with the same moves. So strangely, we are 7 years later and they were still playing this dubious plan. Rook b8, a6, rook b8, b5. So that's kind of interesting. And this is why I tell you it's interesting. Because, you see, the problem is that the author doesn't tell you that. The author doesn't think about that. But we need to think about that. Because if 7 years later they were still playing the same thing, well, it seems that they didn't know what to do best, right? And they were all human in that time. So they were not with computers that could solve for them the problem. In any case, it was played 95, okay? H3, Queen B6, and here we have a diagram and the position that I told you about. Now this is the real test, okay? Here it says, Black's dubious opening play has landed him in quite a delicate position. His main problem is the unsteadiness of the e5 knight, which would be immediately trapped if White could carry out the advance f4, but you can't because, okay? White has several ways to try to take advantage of this. White to play, choose one of the following possibilities. Option A, you play 17 Queen d4, offering the exchange of queens. Option B, you play Knight d4, threatening to trap the knight on f4 because you're going to play this, right? And then we have option C, you play King h1 with the same idea as mentioned in option B, which is to play f4 and trap the knight, okay? So, which move are you going to play? Are you going to play Queen d4, option A, Knight d4, option B, or King h1, option C? Pause the video and try to find out. I will go to find the solution of the test, and here the themes is, so I hope you pause the video and found the solution. Here the theme is transition into the endgame, the art of exchanging. The correct move was Queen d4. The other choices are also advantageous for White, but this is the strongest continuation. After the exchange of queens, and thanks to the threat of trapping the knight, White gains a crucial tempo to penetrate with the rook on the 7th rank. This rook, right? If this was your choice, option A, you have earned 5 points. The move in option B, knight d4, while being a natural move, does not threaten to win the piece due to the pin on the g1, a7 diagonal. In fact, it would continue with rook b c8, okay? And if you play this, there is a mistake. This is a mistake, right? Why it's a mistake? Because knight f3, check. Now, after bishop takes f3, there is rook takes e1, right? And then you have queen takes e1 and queen takes d4. And as you can see, it's good for black in a sense. So here it says you gain 1 point for this choice, and the move suggested under option C, which is king h1, also gives White a clear advantage, although it is more difficult to realize. In that case, king h1 gives 3 points. So let's go back to see what was the position in that time. I think it was something like this, right? I hope I got it right, or maybe not. No, maybe it was here. It was here, yeah. So let's see, the right move was queen d4, but if he plays king h1, I thought of this move by black, because at that point if you play f4 he can play knight f7, right? Yeah, this is what I thought, but there is this centralization of the knight that is nice, and as you can see, white has a kind of space advantage, but in any case king h1 would give you 3 points, okay? So option A was 5 points, option B 1 point, and option C 3 points. Now let's see the end of the game. Okay, now we can see how the game ended. I would like to add one comment. I saw this idea of the points, but there is no one final table saying, hey, you scored 500 points, you are a good level in middle game, like a grandmaster or like an international master. No, I don't find this in the book. In the book they said that depending how you score on some exercises, you know if that theme is understood by you or not. In this case, the theme of test number 1 was transition into the endgame, the art of exchanging, okay? So if you score well, it means you understood that. I honestly didn't think this was a transition into the endgame. I thought this was just to try to trap the knight, if there was a possibility to trap it, okay? So after queen d4, black continue with f6, queen takes b6, rook takes b6, knight d4, so the wheel, white wheel is to go here, g5, rook c7, and rook d8. Again, it says directed against 21, f4, winning a piece. Okay. Yeah. So, because the problem was that the bishop d7 was defending by this, if he's able to play f4. So, f4 is a theme here, as you can see. And the idea is to remove the defendant. Again, this is another tactical theme more than something related to go into an endgame, because this doesn't look like an endgame to me. Okay, why it doesn't look like an endgame? Because with the 4 rooks on the board and this kind of power, the king is definitely not an active piece. In the endgame, generally the king becomes very active and help the pieces or the pawns to move forward and win the game or block something, right? That's the huge difference. Okay, the game continues with king h2, h6, and now there is bishop e4, and here there is a diagram. In this diagram it's written threatening to exchange the light square bishops. Okay, so it wants to play probably bishop f5. Let's see. King f8, f4, knight f7, bishop f3, rook b8. And now there is an interesting move by white, which is knight e6, threatening. What is it doing here? No, the black knight now will be forced to move to the corner, and that's the problem. Because after bishop takes e6, f takes e6, okay, sorry, d takes e6, we have knight h8, the only square, right? He couldn't go anywhere else. And look here, f5. This is making that knight dead, totally dead. That's incredible. That's incredible. b4, bishop b7. So he wants to control c8 to avoid to lose the control. So this is a kind of Zugzwang. And after a5, white played e4. And although the material is level, black is forced to resign. Okay, and that's it for this test number 1 in the Ultimate Chess Strategy book volume 1. If I receive a positive feedback, I will publish more games from this book so you can test yourself. I hope you enjoyed this game. It was very interesting, in fact, and thank you for watching.